Hi all, this is Nelly, Ordinary People, Saintly Souls, and I continue to paraphrase for you and summarize for you the fifth book of Maria Valtorta's visions about the days before the crucifixion on Good Friday. And we are still on the Wednesday, and Jesus has been speaking and preaching in the temple, and he has been dressing down the leaders of the temple because he's trying to explain to the people what is wrong with the current governance, what is wrong with the current leaders, and why something new will come in their place, or something will change. And he is very tired, as I said, and sweaty, and then he goes into what is called the King's Garden, and that garden is close to David's palace, what used to be David's palace, and you can find it in the Old Testament. It's mentioned in, for example, the second book of Kings, chapter 25, verse 4, and Nehemiah, the third chapter, verse 15. And that garden is actually close to the public, but the guards know him and they let him in, and he's not the only one who's going to be in the garden, because all his apostles, 12 apostles, and all his disciples, that were 72 people who were like the next circle after the apostles, are following him. So there are quite a lot of people, and he says, would you mind going to call the women? And so also his mother and Mary of Magdalene, Martha, her sister, and many other of his women followers are also coming to the garden. They bring food for all of them and refreshments. And they're quite many, actually. For example, some are family members, his aunties, and some are women who have been following him throughout the 3 years in different ways. Now, he first meets with his mother, and he falls asleep on her lap. But he wakes up after a while, he wakes up with a jolt because he has a nightmare, and he screams, Judas. So I don't know what he is dreaming about. It doesn't say that. But Mary tries to console him and said, I brought your favorite food. And so we figure out now, we learn what Jesus' favorite food was. That is honey on a bun and water with mint. And Mary makes that herself. And the honey, she explains, tastes a bit like the mint because the bees feed from the flowers of the mint. She also talks about that he was not very kind to the temple leaders. But he says, listen, mother, it is the hour of supreme truths. Because it might fall on deaf ears, but others will take it seriously. And basically he's saying, I'm running out of time. And then Mary mentions that Gamaliel, the leader of the temple, was not there. What it actually means is that he probably stayed away on purpose, because earlier in the visions of Valtorta, you see that Gamaliel meets with Jesus. He meets him somewhere, and he has a long discussion with Jesus. And you see him kind of move towards accepting Jesus' message. So he's not really rejecting Jesus like many of the other leaders do. And we can read about him in the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, for example, the 5th chapter, verses 34 through 39, there we see that he defends the disciples, because after Jesus has returned to heaven, the disciples are preaching in Jerusalem about Jesus, and the temple establishment gets mad and arrests them. And then Gamaliel speaks up for them and says that he does not want these people to be locked up, and he doesn't want them to be executed either. So he defends the disciples. And according to the visions of Valtorta, at one point, Gamaliel did become a Christian. So now back to the women. All the women are very happy to see Jesus, and he's happy to see them. First of all, Mary of Magdalene, she tells him that she has washed and pressed his mantle for the Passover dinner. And that is basically the mantle that he will wear before the crucifixion. Remember, there is the story that the soldiers are gambling away his clothes under the cross. Well, one of it is this mantle. Jesus tells the women how happy he is that they have come, because he said, you love me without any self-interests. So basically, women had nothing to gain and women had nothing to lose by following Jesus. Well, actually, they had everything to lose. Some had husbands who didn't like that they were hanging out with Jesus, and some, had sons who didn't want it. But so the women actually, in Jesus' eyes, are more loving and more dedicated than the man, who some of them still have in the back of their mind, oh, he is our new king, or he's our new leader, and he's important, and maybe we can be important through him. There's all kinds of reasons why people maybe want to, cozy up to Jesus. But after a while, the disciples and the apostles all wake up, and the women go back because they have to start preparing for Passover. And Jesus speaks again to the disciples about this new church, about this new edifice that he's going to build. And I will talk to you about that in the next video. See you then. This was Nelly for Ordinary People, Saintly Souls. Thanks for joining me today. Bye.